Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a really incredible paradox. When you think about the modern, hyper-capitalist world of professional sports, top-tier football is completely dominated by global billionaires, massive transfer fees, and these international superstars who bounce from country to country. And yet, right in the middle of all this globalized frenzy sits Athletic Club de Bilbao. They're a top-tier Spanish team, but they operate under a philosophy that literally defies modern sporting logic. So today, we're going to explore the history of this super unique club, look at its deep ties to Basque nationalism, and discover how one specific player is fundamentally changing what it means to be Basque. To really wrap our heads around this story, we actually have to rewind all the way back to 1912. Up until that point, Athletic Club had been fielding English players, which was pretty standard for early European clubs at the time. But in 1912, they introduced this unwritten rule that would completely change their trajectory forever. It was a rule that essentially cut them off from the global talent pool entirely, meaning they were going to rely solely on the people right in their own backyard. Which brings us to the central question we want to answer in this explainer. In a sport practically ruled by global billionaires, how on earth does a team survive using only local talent? Well, the crazy thing is, it's not just that Athletic Club survives. They actually thrive. Alongside absolute giants like Real Madrid and Barcelona, Athletic Club is one of only 3 clubs to have never been relegated from Spain's top division, La Liga. Not once. And they've maintained this incredible record for well over a century, all without buying a single foreign superstar. Section 1. An anomaly in football. So to understand how this club actually pulls off this macro-level anomaly, we have to look at the absolute engine of their operation, the Cantera policy. Essentially, this is an unwritten rule that restricts Athletic Club to fielding only local Basque players. It's a fiercely guarded, super localized recruitment policy. And the funny thing is, if a club presidential candidate wanted to abolish this policy tomorrow just to compete with Real Madrid's spending, they technically could. But in 118 years, no one ever has. The local supporters are just totally, fiercely united in preserving this tradition. Now, you might be wondering, how do they actually define who gets to play? Well, it is strictly limited. Eligibility requires a player to either be born in the Basque Country, which includes the Spanish communities Navarre and the northern Basque region over in France, or, alternatively, the player has to have been formed in a Basque youth academy. By guarding these boundaries so closely, Athletic Club holds this immense power to officially define who is and who isn't Basque. There's this fantastic local saying that sums the whole thing up perfectly. Con cantera y afición no hace falta importación. Which translates to, with homegrown talent and local support, you don't need imports. This isn't just about trying to save a few bucks on transfer fees, right? It is a profound point of pride. It shapes this unyielding identity of self-reliance, and it proves to the rest of Spain, and really the whole world, that their local community is strong enough to step onto the pitch and compete with absolutely anyone. Section 2. The de facto national team. Because of these incredibly strict local boundaries, putting on that Athletic Club shirt carries a political and cultural weight that goes way beyond your normal sports team. For a lot of people, they are essentially the de facto national team of the Basque people. You see, throughout the 20th century, the Basque people faced severe oppression, particularly under the dictatorship of Francisco Franco, who actively tried to suppress Basque culture and language to push a unified Spain. During that time, Athletic Club basically became a vessel of resistance. In fact, in a famously defiant moment back in 1976, just a year after Franco's death, the club captain, José Ángel Iribar, carried the Icarina, the Basque flag, right out onto the pitch at San Mamés Stadium. Keep in mind, this was at a time when that flag was strictly banned from public display. The stadium literally erupted. It was a moment where the team was quite literally carrying the weight of a nation's identity on their shoulders. Okay, so the crucial point here is how we actually go about defining this Basque identity that they're fighting for. Historically, a lot of European nationalisms, including Basque nationalism, leaned heavily into something called primordialism. That's the idea that identity is ancient, it's baked in, based on strict bloodlines and genetics. But over time, the reality on the ground has shifted much more towards social constructivism. That's where identity is based on things like your birthplace, learning the local Usker language, and actively participating in shared cultural values. And we can actually see this shift backed up by hard data. When we look at survey data of fan demographics from the Weatherton thesis, it shows that today, the way Basque Athletic Club fans view their own identity aligns really closely with that theory of social constructivism. While a massive chunk of them are indeed born in the region, the defining characteristics of their Basquenes are tied to speaking the language and sharing cultural actions. It really proves that ethnicity here isn't just about genetics. It's very much a social reality that is actively constructed by the community itself. Section 3. A Panther Among Lions. Now we're going to zoom in on a much more micro level, human story. Because as modern immigration has totally reshaped the demographics of Europe, a new protagonist stepped onto the scene who seemingly disrupted the visual norm of this historically white institution. And honestly, the club's integration has been a pretty slow evolution. Back in 1957, a black player named Miguel Jones, who grew up right there in Bilbao, was rejected by the club, allegedly due to strict provincial rules at the time. It wasn't actually until 2009 that Jonas Ramalho became the first mixed-race player to ever debut for the first team. But the real paradigm shift? That happened in 2014 with the debut of Iñaki Williams, who rapidly became a superstar and the team's first ever black goalscorer. Iñaki's background is just an amazing story, and it creates this fascinatingly liminal identity. His parents originally met in Ghana, and his mother was a refugee fleeing the civil war in Liberia. They made this incredibly difficult migration to Spain, seeking opportunity, and Iñaki ended up being born in Bilbao. In this beautiful nod to their new home, his mother actually gave him a very traditional Basque name, Inaki. He grew up in the region, entered the athletic youth system, and eventually secured a professional contract that allowed his hardworking family to finally be fully reunited. And Williams is deeply, deeply self-aware of his unique position in all of this. He once said this fantastic quote, "I feel Basque, but part of me is African." He totally embraces this in-between space. By proudly claiming both of these identities, he refuses to let them be mutually exclusive. He's basically saying, look, I have an equal claim to my Basque homeland and to my African roots. Even his nickname is a brilliant illustration of how complex his acceptance really is. His teammate dubbed him La Pantera, the Panther. Now, since athletic club players are famously known as the Lions, this moniker is a really clever thematic anchor. It marks him as a big cat, right? Part of the collective team, part of the pride. But it also still designates him as phenotypically different from the rest. It highlights that he is conditionally accepted, operating in the super complex space where his unbelievable athletic prowess grants him access to a Basque identity that historically has always been coded as white. Section 4. Performing a new identity. So why does all this matter? Because Iñaki Williams' success on the pitch is about so much more than just football. It is having a massive sociological impact on European ethno-nationalism as a whole. To really grasp this, we can look at the theory of performativity, which was famously outlined by the philosopher Judith Butler. Performativity basically suggests that identity isn't this fixed, static thing. Rather, it is actively constructed and enacted through our repeated actions. The idea is that the national body is literally made and enacted through sports. So by calling Iñaki Williams up to play, and by Williams repeatedly putting on that red and white shirt, kissing the badge, and scoring goals for Athletic Club, he is quite literally performing and expanding the borders of the Basque nation in real time. All of this forces us to ask a really profound question. Whose body is allowed to represent the nation? Think about it. In an increasingly globalized Europe, where debates over immigration totally dominate the political sphere, Athletic Club, by their very own strict self-imposed rules, has officially designated a black man, the son of African refugees, as the ultimate representative of Basque exceptionalism. And the ripple effect of this? It's just staggering. There was a Spanish documentary that interviewed African immigrants living in Bilbao, and it found them fiercely, passionately supporting Athletic Club. Because of Inaki, these men feel a genuine sense of belonging. In fact, one immigrant triumphantly declared to the cameras, "Chico, I am Basque." Williams' sheer presence on that pitch proves that a black Basque body is now totally thinkable. It empowers immigrants to claim an identity that once completely excluded them. And it leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. If a century-old hyper-local football tradition can evolve to actually broaden the racial borders of its nation, how much more elastic our own national identities than we've been led to believe?